At 36, Suzanne helped others heal. She could read a stranger's anxiety by the way they breathe, calm panic with a sentence, and guide clients back into their bodies with grace. Yet, when the sessions ended and the room fell silent, she faced a truth she had never spoken aloud. She had never felt what she had helped others seek: release, ease, surrender. For years, she believed her body was the exception, a system that worked everywhere but in pleasure. Partners had been kind, attentive, sometimes even tender. Still, nothing. Just effort, followed by emptiness, the kind of silence that sounds like failure. She told herself it didn't matter. She was spiritual, not sensual. Above it, maybe. But denial has its own heartbeat, and hers pulsed with quiet envy each time someone described joy she could only imagine. Then, one winter afternoon in Santa Fe, a friend invited her to a breathwork session. Nothing erotic, just deep, conscious breathing. Suzanne almost declined, but something inside her whispered, "What if this is the language your body's been waiting for?" Inside the dim studio, strangers lay on mats, eyes closed, air moving in rhythmic waves. As the guide said, "Let the breath find its own way," something in her chest trembled. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the day her body finally answered back. Because sometimes, awakening doesn't begin with touch. It begins with breath. And breath remembers everything we try to forget. Suzanne's life was a study in calm precision. Morning tea steeped for exactly 3 minutes. Journal stacked in neat order. A voice soft enough to soothe anyone except herself. To the world, she was the woman who had it figured out. A certified therapist, grounded, graceful, endlessly patient. But her armor was armor. It was how she hid the ache of a truth she could not diagnose. She could guide everyone home except her own body. She had grown up in a house where feelings were managed, not expressed. Her mother spoke of finding senses were mute and antidepressants were frequent. Resilience, as if softness were a flaw. Her father admired logic, not vulnerability. In their world, the body existed for function, not for feeling. Suzanne learned early that discomfort should be analyzed, not experienced. By the time she reached adulthood, she could name every emotion except her own. Her 20s passed in a blur of learning and caretaking, degrees, certifications, clients. She was excellent at understanding others' nervous systems. Trauma, attachment, inner child wounds, she could map them in her sleep. But when it came to her own sensations, the map went blank. In relationships, she performed intimacy rather than lived it. Her partner saw attentiveness. She felt absence. Each attempt at pleasure became an exam she failed quietly. At 36, she had stopped trying. Some people just don't work that way, she told herself, an echo of the same lie she helped her clients unlearn. Work became her refuge. Helping others became her sedative. But every night, when she lay still, she could feel her breath stopping just before it reached her belly, a small pause that carried years of unspoken tension. She had once read that the body keeps the score. Hers had kept silence instead. Then came Santa Fe. She was there for trauma-informed therapy training, another professional milestone, another certificate to hang on the wall. The desert light felt wider than anything she'd known, and yet she carried the same narrowness inside her. During lunch one afternoon, a fellow attendee mentioned a breathwork studio nearby. "It's not therapy," the woman said. "It's something else. You just breathe until your body shows you what it's been holding." Suzanne smiled politely. She didn't believe in vague spirituality. She believed in peer-reviewed data, not incense. Still, that night, she couldn't sleep. The phrase, "your body shows you what it's been holding," replayed in her mind. What had her body been holding all these years? And what might happen if it finally spoke? The next day, curiosity disguised itself as courage. She booked a spot in the evening session. The confirmation email read simply, "Come as you are. Nothing to fix, nothing to force." That line unsettled her. She had built an entire identity on fixing and forcing, helping others process, guiding them through catharsis. But the idea of showing up with nothing to manage was foreign. It felt dangerous. When she arrived, the studio was softly lit, the air thick with cedar and quiet. People were already lying down, eyes closed, hands resting on their chests. The facilitator, a gentleman in his 50s, greeted her with a knowing nod. "You don't need to understand," he said. "Just breathe. The body remembers how to find itself." Something about those words cracked her professionalism. For the first time in years, she wasn't a therapist. She was simply a person, one breath away from her own truth. Outside, the desert was cooling into night. Inside, the sound of collective breathing began to rise and fall like waves against an unseen shore. Suzanne hesitated, then followed, uncertain, unguarded. What she didn't know was that this simple act, the decision to stay with her own breath, was the beginning of an unraveling she had avoided her entire life. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from what we learn, it comes from what we stop controlling. The first breath betrayed her. It trembled halfway through, a small collapse she tried to hide, even from herself. The facilitator's voice was soft, steady like someone reading from a sacred book written only for the body. Inhale through the mouth, open, full. Exhale without force. Let gravity do the rest. Suzanne followed, awkwardly at first. Years of managing others' emotions had trained her to hold her own. Control was comfort. Even her breathing had boundaries, tidy, efficient, quiet. But within minutes, something began to slip. The air came faster, her chest rising higher than it wanted to. Her mind tried to intervene. "This is unprofessional. You're just oxygenating. Nothing mystical is happening." And yet, beneath the logic, something old began to stir. Images surfaced, scattered and sharp. Her mother smoothing the wrinkles from a white bedsheet, saying, "A good woman stays composed." The first boy who kissed her apologizing afterward, as if he had broken something sacred. The countless sessions where she had told clients, "Notice your sensations. The body is wise." Each memory carried the same message. She had never questioned. Wisdom was for others, not for her. Her breath deepened, and with it came the first sound she hadn't meant to make, a soft, fractured sob. It startled her. She pressed a hand over her mouth. The facilitator noticed, kneeling nearby without touching her. "You don't need to be quiet here," he said gently. "Silence has done its job. Let it rest." The words hit harder than he knew. For 36 years, silence had been her survival strategy. It had kept her professional, respected, safe. But it had also made her a stranger to herself. Every instinct told her to hold the noise back, to remain composed, dignified. But her body refused to obey. Tears came first, then trembling, then a flood of sensation with no name. It wasn't pain. It wasn't joy. It was returning. Inside her, layers began to loosen. The years of being fine, the polite laughter, the intellectual explanations for every ache. Her throat burned from air she had never allowed to escape. Her hands twitched as if dying from a long freeze. Each inhale pulled her deeper into a place she had never mapped. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but somewhere deeper, the quiet voice that every therapist secretly waits to hear from their clients. It said, "I'm still here." The words weren't mystical. They were physiological, the nervous system speaking the only language it knew: presence. In that moment, Suzanne realized something profound. Healing doesn't begin when pain disappears. It begins when the body feels safe enough to feel again. She had spent her life waiting for pleasure, thinking it would arrive like a reward for effort. But now she understood. The body doesn't deliver pleasure on command. It offers it when it finally trusts you. Her breathing slowed. The room felt luminous, as if the air itself had changed texture. The facilitator's voice drifted through the quiet. Every body holds its own intelligence. It's not about control. It's about listening. Listening. The word felt like a doorway. For the first time, she listened not as a professional analyzing patterns, but as a woman hearing the echo of her own aliveness, the rhythm of her lungs, the pulse in her wrists, the faint warmth gathering low in her belly, not erotic, just awake. She remembered a quote from one of her textbooks: "Muscles unlearn faster than memory." She had taught it often, but now it felt different, real. Her muscles were indeed unlearning. The years of bracing, of waiting for permission to exist fully. When the session ended, she lay still, unsure if minutes or hours had passed. Around her, others cried, laughed softly, or lay in silence. She felt none of the embarrassment she expected, only awe. The facilitator approached, his tone gentle. "How are you feeling?" She opened her mouth, but words failed. After a moment, she whispered, "Like I've been breathing wrong my whole life." He smiled, as if he'd heard it many times before. Most of us have. But the body remembers. Keep listening. That night, back in her small hotel room, Suzanne stood before the mirror and looked at herself. Not her reflection, but her presence. The air felt different around her, as if even the silence had softened. She exhaled slowly and said to her own reflection, "I'm still here." And for the first time, the body she'd spent years avoiding answered. The morning after the session, Suzanne woke with a feeling she couldn't name. Her body was sore, not in the way muscles ache after exercise, but in the way emotions do after decades of being restrained. The air felt heavier, her senses sharper. She made tea slowly, watching the steam curl upward, wondering if this was what presence actually felt like. It wasn't enlightenment, it was honesty. But honesty, she quickly discovered, had consequences. At breakfast, her colleagues spoke excitedly about the conference they were attending. She nodded, smiled, but her mind stayed elsewhere. Back on that floor, in the dimly lit studio, on the moment when her body had trembled and then quieted, like a child finally exhaling after a long cry. She wanted to understand it, to dissect it, but the more she tried to explain it, the more it slipped away. When she returned home to Denver a week later, she was both calm and restless. Her daily routines, clients, notes, mindfulness practice, suddenly felt clinical, detached. She noticed how often she spoke of the body as if it were an object, not a home. For years, she had told others that the body keeps the score, but now she understood something deeper. The body also tells the truth, and truth can be uncomfortable. She began to crave silence, but not the numbing kind she used to live in. This was different, a listening silence. Her evening walks grew longer. She would pause by a park bench and feel her heartbeat instead of suppressing it. At first, it frightened her. The awareness felt too intimate, almost intrusive. Is this what I've been avoiding? She wondered. My own pulse? Then came the dreams. They were vivid, memories and sensations intertwined. Her childhood bedroom, the smell of lavender soap, her mother's voice saying, "Be still, Suzanne. Good girls don't make noise." The words echoed like a mantra, blending into her adult life. Quiet dinners, quiet intimacy, quiet everything. The silence she once believed was virtue had, in truth, been self-erasure. She started journaling again, this time without filters. "I've been living like a therapist trapped inside her own body," she wrote. One night. Always observing, never participating. Each page felt like a small rebellion. Her next breathwork session arrived 2 weeks later. She almost canceled. Fear disguised itself as fatigue. What if the first time was a fluke? What if she couldn't access it again? Still, she went. The studio felt familiar now. Candles, soft music, the low hum of anticipation. As she lay down, the facilitator greeted her with the same gentle instruction. Breathe. Let the breath find its rhythm. Don't manage it. Follow it. This time, she didn't analyze. She surrendered. Within minutes, the rhythm took over. Inhale, exhale, open, release. Waves of sensation moved through her body. Tightness in her jaw, heat in her chest, trembling in her hands. She didn't fight them. She listened. Each sensation felt like a sentence her body had been trying to say for years. Her mind offered resistance. You're overreacting. You're making this up. But beneath the doubt was something quieter and stronger. It wasn't pleasure yet. It was permission. And then it happened again. Not as a repeat of the first session, but as a deepening. The sensations rose and fell, not localized, but expansive, like breath turning into soundless music. She felt her body vibrating with emotion, her chest expanding until it felt too full to contain. She wanted to cry, but this time the tears came with gratitude. It wasn't sexual, it was sacred. In that moment, she realized what every nervous system knows. Release isn't about climax, it's about completion. Her body had found its rhythm, and for once, she wasn't trying to control it. When the session ended, she lay motionless, her palms open beside her. The facilitator sat nearby and spoke softly as if not to disturb the air. "You found the current," he said. "Don't rush to define it. Just live differently now." That phrase haunted her for days. Live differently now. She began noticing everything. How often she rushed through touch. How quickly she dismissed her own needs. When washing her hands, she felt the warmth of water against her skin instead of thinking about her next task. When hugging a friend, she didn't pull away first. Even her clients noticed something. "You seem lighter," one said. "Your voice feels slower." But change is rarely linear. The more she opened, the more the old patterns pushed back. One evening, after a difficult session with a client who spoke about sexual trauma, Suzanne felt an old heaviness return. That night, she lay awake, replaying her own experiences. The times she said yes when she meant maybe, the time she felt nothing and pretended otherwise. It wasn't trauma, it was disconnection, which in its own way can be just as heavy. She sat up, turned on the light, and wrote, "I have confused silence for peace, compliance for safety, and numbness for strength." The next morning, she reached out to her breathwork facilitator for guidance. His reply was simple. "What you call regression is often integration. The body revisits what it's ready to rewrite." The sentence stayed with her. She began to treat every reaction, every shiver, every tear of wave of discomfort as communication. Instead of suppressing, she inquired, "Where do you hurt? What do you need?" This wasn't about achieving pleasure anymore. It was about building trust. Because the body, she now realized, doesn't awaken through force. It awakens through safety, through listening, through 1,000 small permissions whispered in the dark. And in that awareness, Suzanne's healing deepened, not as a miracle, but as a method. Breath by breath, she was rewriting her nervous system's story. Her body wasn't broken, it was finally speaking. The third session began before she entered the studio. In the airport security line, Suzanne noticed her breath rising high in her chest, the old habit of holding. Instead of correcting it, she placed 2 fingers on her sternum and whispered inward, "Permission." The air lowered a fraction, reminding her control was a costume she could remove. Santa Fe greeted her with thin sunlight and the hush of winter. The room was dim, mats arranged. The facilitator welcomed everyone, then offered one instruction. "Let the breath lead until you can't tell who is leading." She nodded and lay down. The first minutes were familiar. Mouth open, inhale expanding, exhale falling. Sensations gathered, jaw, throat, ribs. She named them. Tight, warm, held. Then the pattern changed. A trembling began low in her belly, just a tide pulling from beneath the shore. Her mind prepared to analyze. She chose another word, listening. The current strengthened, shoulders softened, fingers tingled. Behind her closed eyes, images rose. A hallway, her younger self laughing, then shrinking. A dorm room where she apologized for not feeling what she thought she should. Each picture dissolved as breath kept its metronome. Tears came without collapse. "Follow the exhale," the facilitator said. "Let it be longer than is comfortable. Safety likes time." She obeyed. Something unlocked. Space beneath her ribs widened, and the tremor turned into waves. Slow, full, moving through bone and breath together. It was coherence, like instruments tuning to the same note. Her jaw released a sound, half sigh, half prayer. She almost shut it down, then remembered her own role. The body tells the truth first. She let the sound finish. Heat spread across her torso, up her throat, cresting behind her eyes, then traveling downward in a gentle arc that left her limbs humming. She didn't chase it. She stayed. A thought flickered. Maybe nothing is wrong with me. The sentence arrived like a lantern in a cave. The wave returned, larger now, circling rather than striking. Her pelvis stayed still, yet the rest of her organized around a center she could not see. Breath stacked on breath until sensation layered into something unmistakable, a release everywhere and nowhere, a widening that felt like yes. When the crest passed, she noticed the quiet. After, vast, precise, kind. She lay crying softly. The facilitator knelt nearby. "You're doing beautifully," he whispered. "Notice what made this possible." She answered inwardly. Permission, time, honesty, not performance. When the session ended, the room sounded ordinary. Blankets folded, bottles clicking shut. She sat up slowly, palms on her thighs, and felt no urge to explain. Explanation had been her way of leaving herself. She wanted to remain. At a cafe afterward, she wrote, "I did not force. I followed. I did not perform. I trusted. My body is not broken. It was quiet." She underlined the last line, then added, "Pleasure is not a prize. It is proof that safety has arrived." On the flight home, she noticed a second turning point, a refusal to argue with what felt true. She ordered tea, closed her eyes, and placed her palm over her sternum. Warmth rose, gentle as a tide under glass. It faded when the intercom crackled, returned when quiet did. Reliability, the nervous system's love language. That night, she prepared her room without ceremony. Dim lamp, phone elsewhere. She stood by the bed and asked the question from consent with self. Where do you want contact? Her hand moved to her ribs, not to achieve, just to greet. Breath met palm. Calm gathered. Waves rose and fell, smaller than at the studio, but true enough to trust. She saw then that the turning point wasn't intensity, it was authorship. For the first time, her body was writing the story, and her mind was consenting to read. Before sleep, she wrote one more line. Muscles unlearn faster than memory. Safety rewires faster than fear. Tomorrow, repeat gently. The changes were quiet at first, almost invisible. Suzanne no longer rushed her mornings. She brewed tea the slow way, feeling the heat rise against her skin, breathing before she spoke. Even her clients noticed it, how her tone had softened, how her presence seemed to hold a kind of gravity. One woman said, "You sound like you're breathing with me." Suzanne smiled. She was. Every part of her life began to reorganize around this new rhythm. The urgency that had once defined her, achieving, fixing, understanding, no longer felt necessary. Her body had taught her something her education never had. That healing doesn't mean doing more, it means allowing more. She learned to listen for signs of safety instead of signs of success. When her shoulders dropped mid-conversation, when her laughter came from her belly instead of her throat, when her breath slowed on its own, those were the new milestones. They meant coherence. They meant her body trusted her now. The next time she shared intimacy with someone, she entered without agenda. No expectation, no silent checklist, just curiosity. When touch arrived, she didn't brace. She breathed. She realized something profound, that the same pathways that carry fear also carry pleasure, and that both respond to presence. Tears and warmth arrived together, not as contradiction, but as completion. She let them come, understanding now that the nervous system doesn't separate them. Tears and pleasure live in the same river, she thought. Only shame ever built the dam. Weeks passed. The internal noise grew faint, replaced by calm she didn't have to maintain. She no longer sought peak experiences. Instead, she followed small cues of aliveness. The way her spine lengthened when she forgave herself, the way silence expanded when she listened without defending. During a breathwork circle she attended months later, the facilitator invited everyone to place a hand over the heart and whisper one sentence they had learned since beginning. Around her, voices murmured fragments of discovery. When her turn came, Suzanne said softly, "My body was never the problem. It was the conversation I refused to have. The group fell silent. No applause, just a collective exhale. That night, she sat by her window, watching the wind move through trees, and thought of all the years she had mistaken numbness for strength. She finally understood. Pleasure wasn't a destination. It was the body's way of saying thank you for listening. And so she kept listening. Each breath, a dialogue. Each moment, a reunion. Months later, Suzanne began teaching again. Not therapy, but what she called embodied awareness workshops. They weren't about breathwork or technique. They were about remembering. Remembering that presence was not an achievement, but a birthright. When she spoke, her words carried the softness of someone who had lived both sides of silence. "We spend years trying to fix our bodies," she told a group one afternoon, when all they ever wanted was to be heard. The women nodded, not out of agreement, but recognition. She often reflected on that first moment in Santa Fe, the breath that became a wave, the release that rewired her life. Back then, she thought she had experienced something rare. Now she knew it was universal. The body is always trying to find its way back to safety. It just needs an invitation. Sometimes she would describe healing as a slow conversation between memory and muscle. The body doesn't move on from pain, she'd say. It moves with it until the rhythm changes. And when someone asked what she meant by pleasure, she no longer blushed or stumbled for the right vocabulary. Pleasure, she would answer, is what arrives when truth has enough room to breathe. Her reflections filled new journals, not of therapy notes, but of quiet wisdom gathered from experience. She wrote, "The body doesn't rush forgiveness. Trust is built in breaths, not promises. Presence is the deepest form of touch." Sometimes she reread those lines before bed, tracing the words with her fingertips as if reminding her skin of what it had learned. When asked if she still practiced breathwork, she would smile. "Every day," she'd say. "It just looks like living now." And in that answer was the lesson her story had come to teach, that awareness, once awakened, doesn't belong to the studio, or it belongs to every breath that follows. Because once the body has remembered its voice, silence is never the same again. There was a time Suzanne thought her story ended in that room in Santa Fe, beneath the soft hum of breath and music. But stories like hers don't end. They evolve quietly, carried forward in the rhythm of ordinary days. Now, when she walks through her home, she notices how the air feels different. The silence is no longer an absence. It is an ally. The same woman who once chased control now trusts the pauses between heartbeats. She no longer searches for proof of healing. Her life itself is the proof. One evening, she found her old journals, the ones written before everything shifted. The pages were filled with questions. Why can't I feel? What's wrong with me? When will it happen? She turned each one slowly, tracing the handwriting of the woman she used to be. She didn't feel pity. She felt gratitude. That version of herself had carried the weight of an entire education in shame and still dared to ask questions. Without her, none of this would exist. She wrote one final line beneath the last entry. "You were never broken. You were just waiting to be heard." That became the sentence she offered to others, the quiet message that began every workshop, every conversation, every story she told. She never spoke in slogans or rules. She spoke in truths learned from breath and bone, that the body always asks before it gives, that emotion and sensation share the same nervous system, that pleasure isn't performance, it's connection. And when someone asked how to begin, she always said the same thing: start where your body says yes, even if it's just a breath. She knew now that every transformation begins that way, with one moment of honesty, one breath that doesn't hide. Her story wasn't about mastery. It wasn't even about sex. It was about reclaiming the language of the body, syllable by syllable, until silence turned into belonging. As the evening light dimmed, she stood by her window and whispered the phrase that had guided her since that first session: right now is enough. And for anyone listening, anyone who had ever felt disconnected, numb, or afraid of their own skin, her story carried a simple invitation. Take one breath, feel it land, let it stay. Because somewhere inside, your body is still waiting to be heard. That's where every return begins. That's where every healing starts. And that's where the silent flame keeps burning, quietly, steadily, reminding us all that awareness is not a lesson to learn, it's a life to live.